આખું ગુજરાત સામે બેઠું હોય એવો અનુભવ થાય છે અને પુસ્તકોની વચ્ચોવચ્ચનું જીવન તરબતર છે અને આપ સૌ આવ્યા છો એનો આનંદ છે. અમે એવું માન્યું હતું કે આ વાતચીત તો ગુજરાતીમાંની પણ અંગ્રેજીમાં કરીશું. એ બરાબર છે. વચમાં ગુજરાતી તો આવી જ જશે, પણ મુખ્યત્વે આ ટાટા લિટરેચર ફેસ્ટિવલના કેન્દ્રમાં રાખીને we thought that we will have conversations about Gujarati fiction in English. આ પેરેડોક્સ માણવા જેવો છે કે આપણી મનગમતી વાતો આપણે બીજી ભાષામાં કરીએ પણ વાત તો આપણા મનને ગમતી જ હોય. આ એક વિરલ અનુભવ હતો અમારા જેવા માટે. પહેલી વાત તો કે આપણી પાસે દીપકભાઈ છે એટલે મારે બહુ નિરાશ છું. હું તો કોફી પીશ અને બેસીને એમને સાંભળીશ. બટ ઓફકોર્સ યુ ઓલવેઝ ગેટ વેરી પ્રોવોક્ડ એન્ડ ચાર્જ whenever you start thinking about your own language and your own આપણને જે વારસામાં મળ્યું છે અને હજુ મળ્યા કરે છે એ વિશે વાત કરવાનો પ્રસંગ આવે ત્યારે ઉત્સાહ અને ઉત્તેજના બંને એક સાથે છવાઈ જતા હોય છે. એટલે અમે some of us who were born and brought up in the city of Mumbai, and of course we grew up in Kalwa Devi, so there were Gujaratis all around, including your own family. અને એ ચાલીનું જીવન ને બધું બહુ ભરપૂર હતું. ને દીપકભાઈ પણ પાડોશમાં હતા, સીતાંશુ થોડે દૂર હતો, રાજેન્દ્ર પાસે હતા. એ આખું વાતાવરણ ભુલેશ્વર અને ભોંયવાડા ને કાલબા દેવીથી ધબકતું હતું. એ ગુજરાતી બાળક હોવાને નાતે ગુજરાતી તો છે, પણ બહુ જ રસ પડ્યો હતો નાની ઉંમરથી પરદેશના સાહિત્યમાં, વિશ્વ સાહિત્યમાં. અને સોરી, કેન યુ જસ્ટ હેલ્પ મી એન્ડ પુટ ધીસ અવે? Sorry about this. So, grew up on a huge amount of world literature and continued till today. So I just thought that let's begin with this little fantasy. Just as I would go to Strand bookstall and all the bookstalls of the world all the time and pick up books. So I ended up having, let's say, 5,000 books in my house, out of which 2,000 books has to do with fiction of different languages. And I told myself, what if I were to not do that, but it's the other way around? So that's the afternoon this. We are going to play this game differently. Yes, can you hear me?
I just wanted to... મને એવું લાગે છે, I am Sikh and I understand Gujarati and I enjoy listening to the Gujarati. I only came to listen to Gujarati. So if everybody understands Gujarati, can we go with the Gujarati? I mean, I leave it to you.
It's up to the organizers.
Yeah, the organizers would... We will play between the two languages. દીપકભાઈને તો એ બહુ ફાવટ છે અને વેલ સેડ. ના જરા પણ બરાબર છે. આ ટકોર હંમેશા થતી રહેવાની છે હવેની પેઢીમાં અને આવતા અનેક સૈકાઓ સુધી કે મનગમતી વાત કઈ ભાષામાં કરી શકાય. એટલે મેં કહ્યું કે વી આર ગોઈંગ ટુ પ્લે વિથ ધીસ અનધર ફેન્ટેસી. આ એક પરિકથા મારા મનમાં એક કલ્પનાનું ચિત્ર છે. આઈ એમ ગોઈંગ ટુ પ્લે એટ બિંગ એન ઇજિપ્શિયન or an Armenian or a French young flamboyant girl, or maybe a German mind, or perhaps I'm walking the streets of Prague. Italy would be better with Italo Calvino as a companion. Why not South African, Nadine Gordimer as your friend? Anyone else other than a Gujarati. This is the game I'm going to play with myself today. And what happens when you do that? Because I'm passionate about literature and I'm one of these citizens of any continents in the world, I'm going to walk into the bookstores of different cities and towns of these continents. હું આ બધા શહેર અને આ બધા મુલકોમાં ત્યાં જેટલા બુકસ્ટોરો છે એમાં જઈ પહોંચવાનો છું. કારણ કે હું ગુજરાતી નથી, હું કદાચ જર્મન છું, હું કદાચ ફ્રેન્ચ છું, આર્મેનિયન છું, ઇજિપ્શિયન છું. અને પછી ગયા પછી હું એ વિભાગમાં જતો હોઉં છું, આઈ ગો ટુ દેટ સેક્શન વિચ ઇઝ વર્ડ લિટરેચર ઇન ટ્રાન્સલેશન્સ. જે મુંબઈના બુક સ્ટોરોમાં અમે હોંશે હોંશે દોડીને જતા અને આલ્બર્ટ કેમુ ને ફોકનર અને કાલ્વિનો ને કેમુ ને બેકેટને લઈને ઘેર આવતા અને આડોશ પાડોશમાં પૂછાતું કે આ બધું શું છે, અને અમે કહેતા અમારી પોતાની એક આગવી દુનિયા છે, આગવું વિશ્વ છે. In a similar way, one could experience, because one goes into a bookstore in the streets of Rome and Florence and Egypt, Cairo, and picks up Chunilal Madiya in English translation, picks up Pannalal Patel in English translation. And here I am in my study, all charged up to enter the world of streets, of villages and towns and the cities of Gujarat, which is completely alien to me, just as everything of the world literature is alien to me, and I play the game of making it my own. Let's try to experience that possibility. 2022 છે આ, અને શું આપણે ચુનીલાલ મડિયા કે પન્નાલાલ પટેલ કે કનૈયાલાલ મુનશી કે મધુ રાય કે જયંત ખત્રી કે વર્ષાબેન કે સ્વરૂપ ધ્રુવ કે ધીરુબેન પટેલ ફરી પાછા આપણને એટલી આશ્ચર્યજનક રીતે વિસ્મયપૂર્વક અભિભૂત કરીને વિશ્વ નાગરિક બનાવી શકે? That's the game we are going to play. And then there is a thrilling way of revisiting Gujarati fiction. એકી માત્ર BA with ગુજરાતી કરતી વખતે એકાદ પુસ્તક વાંચી અને પાસ થઈ ગયા એમ નહીં, અથવા તો 1920 પછીની પેઢીના શિક્ષિત વર્ગમાં નવલકથાનું જે એક ઘેન હતું વાંચવાનું, ને એમાં સારંગબારો તો હોય જ, એ જાતનું ઘેન હતું. બધું ચારે બાજુથી વીણી કરીને પુસ્તકાલયોમાંથી, અને એ પણ પેલી એવી લાઇબ્રેરી જેના ચોપડામાં આપણે લખીએ કે આજે આ લીધી 2 દિવસ પછી પાછી આપી. Just as we go to Asiatic society and pick up the world literature, can we pick up Gujarati fiction like that? That's the experience. If we can have, we are on a great journey. So, આ એક યુક્તિ જો કરી બેસીએ ગુજરાતી સાહિત્યની જાણી અજાણી કૃતિઓને ફરી એકવાર સ્પર્શવાની, એના પાનાઓ ખોલવાની, તો શક્ય છે કે we may recover the extraordinary range of what Gujarati fiction has achieved in last 165 years and continues to play different, અનેક રીતે ફરી પોતાને ઓળખ આપી રહ્યું છે સાંપ્રત સાહિત્યના સર્જકો દ્વારા. And who else but Sri Deepak Mehta, a lifelong reader and commentator and a scholar of Gujarati fiction, would be a better guide to go around on this journey? કારણ કે આપણે તો કેરોમાં મોટા થયા હોઈએ, પ્રાગમાં ભણ્યા હોઈએ, અને પછી પન્નાલાલ પટેલની ચોપડી ઘરે લઈ જઈએ ત્યારે દીપકભાઈ બાજુમાં ઊભા હોય ને કે તું એમ કર, માનવીની ભવાઈથી શરૂ કર, Zakzu son manmi bhavai. So I would say, oh, sure, man, sure, like that. અને એ સંદર્ભમાં આ વાતચીતનો દોર થવાનો છે. We are going to have conversations, keeping this playful, exciting possibility of recovering and revisiting and relocating. ફરી પાછા એ સ્થળકાળમાં દાખલ થવાનું છે, ફરી પાછા એ વાતાવરણને ઝીલવાનું છે, જીરવવાનું છે અને પ્રમાણવાનું છે. એટલે હું દીપકભાઈને હવે પ્રશ્નો પૂછવાનું એક વાતાવરણ ઊભું કરું છું. ઇફ વી વેર ટુ રિકવરનો અર્થ બહુ સરસ છે, ડિસ્કવર. આમ તો ત્યાં જ છે, માત્ર એને ખોલવાનું છે, તો ત્યાં જ છે. ઇફ યુ વેર ટુ રિકવર, revisit and bring back the outstanding and memorable prose writings of Gujarati fiction in the midst of the reading citizens of Gujarati speaking friends all across the world, not limited to the classroom, but out into the world. What works of fiction, Deepak Bhai, would you recommend? And for what reasons? એવી કઈ કૃતિઓ તરફ તમારી નજર પહેલાં પડે ને તમે કહો સાંભળ અહીંયા આવો જો આ વાંચ અને પછી એ તો પૂછવાનો જ છે ઉત્સુક છે જેમ હું આલ્બર્ટ કેમુ વિશે કોઈ ફ્રેન્ચને પૂછું કેમ તો એ કહેશે કે આ કારણોસર તમારે કેમુને વાંચવા જોઈએ એ કારણો કયા આપી શકે દીપકભાઈ આપી શકે અને એવી કઈ યુક્તિઓ તમે કરો કે જેથી આ ઉત્સુક યુવાન વાચકોને તમે એમાં રસ લેતા કરી શકો સો ટુ રિપીટ ધ ક્વેશ્ચન વિચ books, works of fiction would you recommend to start with?
Thank you, Prabodh bhai. Before I respond to your query, I too would like to say a few words in our mother tongue Gujarati. અને ખાસ તો મારે આપ સૌનો આભાર માનવાનો છે કારણ કે સાહિત્ય માટેનો સાચો પ્રેમ ન હોય તો બપોરે 2 વાગે જે બહુ નજીકની કે સહેલી જગ્યા ન કહેવાય એવી જગ્યાએ આવવું એ શક્ય ન બને એટલે આપ સૌના સાહિત્ય માટેના પ્રેમને મારી સલામ છે અને પ્રબોધભાઈની અને આપ સૌની જે અપેક્ષા હશે એને કેટલે અંશે હું સંતોષી શકીશ એની મને ખબર નથી પણ મારાથી બને એટલો પ્રયત્ન કરીશ. Now come back to his question. First of all, I would like to admit that we, the people of Gujarat, are better importers of literature than exporters of literature. We have translations from so many Indian languages as well as other languages. We have imported V.S. Khandekar wholesale. We have imported Sharad Babu wholesale. We have all the works of Tagore translated. We have Premchand and many more authors. I'm mainly mentioning fiction writers because that is the focal point of our discussion today. Compared to that, our export of literature is not that good. Of course, in recent years, there have been good translations. Here I would like to mention one fact, or rather 2 facts. We believe that this process of translation between languages is a special phenomenon of 20th century or 21st century, but that's not the case. The very first Gujarati novel, Karan Ghelo, published in 1866, was translated and published in book form in Marathi in 1901. And that translation was done by Ramchandra Bikaji Gunjikar, who wrote the first historical novel in Marathi, Mochangat. So the first historical novel of Gujarati was translated into Marathi by the author who wrote first historical novel in Marathi. Another thing I would like to mention is that the very first novel to be published in any of the Indian languages was in Marathi, Yamuna Paryatan by Baba Padmanji, which was published in 1857. At that time, I know Ala Gharir Dulal was being written, and it was serialized in a periodical, but it was not published in book form. It was published next year or so. And the third novel amongst all the Indian languages was this Karan Ghelo, which I mentioned, which was written by Shankar Mehta. So we have a long tradition, as he says, about 160 years. Now, his question was, which authors I would place before today's reader? And here we have to be very honest with ourselves. If you ask anyone who is the tallest novelist of Gujarati, most of them would say Govardhanram Tripathi. But if I have to introduce Gujarati novel to a non-Gujarati, perhaps I would not put Saraswatichandra in his hands. One, it is very bulky, more than 2000 pages. Second, it deals with a period which is far removed from where we are today. I am not trying to diminish its importance or its literary value, but for today's average reader, it would be too heavy reading. My first choice would be, he asked me, whom would you put? Would be Kanaiyalal Munshi. One, because he is a master storyteller and a person who is trying to read fiction from other language, to my mind would be first attracted by this story. And second reason for that is that luckily we have very good translations already available of at least 3 works of him which are the masterpieces, and they have been translated by Rita Kothari and Abhijit. Yeah. Incidentally, Karan Ghelo has also been translated into English and published by Penguin, and that's also quite good translation. But the way in which Nanda Shankar deals with history and the way in which Munshi deals with history are quite apart. And for today's reader, Munshi would be a good beginning point.
Just a thought about that.
Yeah.
Yes, Munshi is quite a adored figure of Gujarati psyche, partly because he is very much in tune with the present mood of the nation. Present mood of the nation has a certain soft corner for reading history in a certain way. Very invitingly problematic, delightfully engaging, but Gujaratni asmita and Hindu vision of who we are, the glory of Patan, અને બહુ સહેલાઈથી ગમી જાય એવા આ મનગમતા વિચારો ભારતીય સંસ્કૃતિ વિશેના મુનશીને બહુ જ પ્રિય હતું. એટલે આ સંદર્ભમાં એક ટકોર મને યાદ આવે છે અને પછી એ વાત આગળ ચલાવીએ કે why would I gladly have more dialogues with Deepak bhai about critically examining Munshi's writings, both as a novelist and as a world view that novel embodies. 1932ની આસપાસ, કરેક્ટ મી ડેટ્સમાં, મુનશીએ હિસ્ટ્રી ઓફ ગુજરાતી લિટરેચર પુસ્તક પ્રગટ કર્યું હતું અને એની ભૂમિકા માટે મોહનદાસભાઈને કહ્યું કે તમે
Gujarat and its literature.
ગુજરાત એન્ડ ઇટ્સ લિટરેચર તમે લખી આપો. ઈ ટોલ્ડ ગાંધી. ગાંધી ઓફકોર્સ બે ચાર થાબડી શકાય એવા શબ્દો કયા ને પણ છેલ્લા ફકરામાં એક ટકોર કરી કે આ તમે બધું કરો છો ને ભણેલા ગણેલાઓનું બધું બરાબર છે પણ આમાં પેલો વર્ગ ક્યાં છે કે જેને એ મૂંગાને વાચા નથી આપી. વેર ઇઝ ધેટ? So when you write your history again of Gujarat and its literature, make sure that it addresses those questions. 1932 અને આજે 2022માં ગુજરાત એનો ઉત્તર આપી રહ્યું છે. ઇન ધ રાઇટિંગ્સ ઓફ જોસેફ મેકવાન, દલપત ચૌહાણ, ઉમેશ સોલંકી અને આ જે લેખકોએ ફરી એકવાર મૂંગી ગુજરાતી જનતાને એક અવાજ આપ્યો છે. દેટ ઇઝ વેર મુનશી નીડ્સ ટુ થિંક અબાઉટ his world view. પણ ઓફકોર્સ ઇઝ એ માસ્ટર સ્ટોરી ટેલર. થોડુંક એમાંથી વાંચતા રૂવાડા ઊભા થઈ જાય, રોમાંચ થાય અને એ તો પાછા નીચેને વાંચીને બેઠેલા એટલે એમના મનમાં એક મહામાનવનો આદર્શ હતો. ધ ગ્રેટ મેન વિલ કમ વિચ ઇઝીલી gives way to a possibility on authoritative regime. That Munshi's world view is easy to get into that direction. And by glorifying the Gujarati quote unquote the past of the Rajput and the entire history of those 800 years and tackling બધા બહુ જ રસ પડે એવા ચર્ચાના વિષયો છે. અને તમે પોતે પણ આમ તો મુનશીને જરાક ક્યાંક ટકોર કરતા સરસ લેખો લખ્યા જ છે. એટલે લેટ્સ મૂવ ઓન. મુનશી એઝ વન ઓફ ધ ફર્સ્ટ ચોઇસ ફોર રીડેબિલિટી and accessibility.
But let me say something about Munshi. Yes, there is an overall general impression that he is a person who stands for glory of Gujarat, Gujaratni Asmita, and also Hinduism. But please, don't misunderstand him. What he advocates is not today's Hindutva. Basically, he is not for Hinduism, he is for Aryatva. And secondly, yes, he is for Gujaratni Asmita, but that is not his final goal. His final goal, as represented by Kirtidev, is Akhand Bharat, one nation. But since he was writing a historical novel, he very well knew that in that period he cannot show that ideal to succeed. It had to fail. But that was his ideal. And another fact, when this agitation for separate Gujarat and Maharashtra was going on, Munshi was one of very few persons who said no, Gujarat's interest will be to remain with Maharashtra and have Bombay state as it was earlier.
That's amazing. You're very right.
So if his Gujarat was what is Gujarat of today's politicians, he would not have said that. And if he had not said that, perhaps he would have been the first chief minister of Gujarat. Because he was already a minister
Yes.
long back in Gujarat, in Bombay government.
એટલે this is a wonderful opening.
Yeah, I know I'm digressing from
No, no,
our,
you're not. It's
our
a
track.
wonderful opening.
Yeah.
You made one point that you wouldn't begin with Govardhanram, which is very interesting because it's very interesting to revisit Govardhanram in the context of what is fiction and what does it do, what place does it have. કારણ કે આપણને બધાને એક એવો સમય હતો જ્યારે આપણે મોહ પામ્યા હતા નવલકથાના સ્વરૂપથી. એ વખતે we were just beginning to be educated, English and we were very eager to absorb Charles Dickens ને Jane Austen તો ખરા જ, Shakespeare તો ખરા જ, પણ we were also beginning to look at our own writers in our own language. એ પેઢી બહુ જ રસ પડે એવી હતી. એને બંને ભાષા તરફ યુનિક પ્રકારનો પ્રેમ હતો. એ સંદર્ભમાં ગોવર્ધનરામ સરસ્વતીચંદ્રનો પહેલો ભાગ તો આઈ વુડ રિકમેન્ડ ઓલ ધ ટાઈમ ટુ એવરી વન. હી રાઇટ્સ નોવેલ્સ હેવ ઇન ધીઝ ડેઝ, એ 1886માં લખી રહ્યા છે. novels have in these days become a universal luxury. Mercedes જ કોને 2022ની. And in competing for public interest have succeeded to an extent almost unrivaled. પણ હું નવલકથા એટલા માટે લખી રહ્યો છું અને અહીંયા આગળ આપણને we have an interesting debate that can be very fruitful. Is writing an activity which is concerned with the ethical values of human life, or is it concerned with the aesthetics? અને Govardhanram raises that question once and for all in the very first major work, and he says that the very natural result has been that the bulk of fiction has ceased to aspire beyond an artistic display of such of the sentimental and emotional idiosyncrasies of mankind as happens to tickle the fancy of the ordinary reader. It is, however, certain, and the higher class of novelists never fail to recognize and claim, that the functions of the novel are more numerous, higher, and more sacred than the mere pandering to the taste of the novel reading public. મનોરંજન કરવું, રંજન કરવું, કે એનાથી પણ વધારે કંઈક vision સાથે novelist enters into the world અને કહેશે I want to change the mold of the inner self of the human beings. એટલે આ બહુ રસપ્રદ એવી ચર્ચાની શરૂઆત થઈ ગઈ છે. The coinciding of the aesthetic and the ethical, which continues in many ways. પણ આપણે આગળ ચાલીએ. તમે કહ્યું કે not the classical idealist, Kalyan Gram of Govardhanram, but the aggressive, powerful voice of the Kshatriya. Munshi to પાછા ભરૂચના, એટલે there is that, aggressive nature.
ભરૂચના નહીં, સોરી, મુંબઈના. He himself has said.
I know. ભરૂચના એટલે ભરૂચ.
એ જન્મ્યા.
બીજા છે.
એમ તો ગોવર્ધનરામ જન્મ્યા તમારા નડિયાદમાં.
Yes.
પણ એ પણ મુંબઈના. 4 ભાગમાંથી 3 ભાગ સરસ્વતીચંદ્રના મુંબઈમાં લખાયા, ચોથું શરૂ પણ મુંબઈમાં થયું.
Okay. So we will neither start with the classics, which is Govardhanram, or romantic, which is Munshi, and I could read some passages to show how deeply romantic he is in the positive sense of the term. Should we consider starting with something else completely, which is, according to, personally, I think, there has been no author like Pannalal Patel almost anywhere in Godard comes closest to it, but anywhere, I think it can be a refreshing experience if one reads it in the light of contemporary world in which we are. So what is your...
Can you use the mic, please?
Yeah, I was just suggesting that would you consider master storyteller Pannalal Patel as a starting point if one were to kind of recover and revisit Gujarati fiction? And if you do, what would make you do that?
Prabodh, my personal preference would be first to introduce Meghani to
Yes,
Satia,
that's a good, I will quit that.
and then go to Pannalal. Both of them deal with the land to which they belong. Meghani to Saurashtra, or Kathiawad as they used to call it in those days, and Pannalal, of course, to his. But to my mind, Meghani's dedication to his land and the people and the language is perhaps a bit deeper than that of Pannalal. The reason why I am saying this is, we all know Pannalal is even today a popular writer, popular novelist in Gujarati, but if you see figures and facts, which of his novels are more popular? The mythological novels to which he later on migrated completely,
I know, weakest. Yeah.
and which are the weakest from the literary point of view, are most selling of his novels today.
Which is unfortunate, yes.
So, I mean, I'm not able to explain this phenomenon, why it should happen, how it should happen. But on the other hand, Meghani, once and for all, stuck to what was closer to him, which he knew better, except perhaps one or two novels where he where he diverted, but immediately realized that this was not his cup of tea, and then most of the time he was dealing with Kathiawad. And I would somehow suggest that non-Gujarati reader would be safer and easier with Meghani than Pannalal. The third author I would recommend
Is Madiya?
Joseph McQuan.
Oh, yeah.
Madiya I am not doing because Meghani serves purpose of what
Madiya.
I mean, Madiya has its own way of dealing with people and places, but ultimately he also deals with Saurashtra or a particular region of Saurashtra, except for his one novel, which is not at all popular, but which deals with the life of Bombay city as it was then Bombay, not today's Mumbai. Indradhanu no Athmo Rang. I mean, I have seldom come across a better Gujarati novel dealing with the life of a Mumbaikar. So that may be exception, but I would prefer Joseph McQuan, because again here you have totally different world, and he was the first one to introduce this Dalit world to Gujarati novel. And I mean, it's not only historical, but he was a very powerful narrator,
yeah.
and he knew his society and his people and the customs and the language, and again he stuck to that.
Yes.
So that would be my third choice. Then I would go to Pannalal. After one reads and enjoys Meghani, perhaps he is ready for Pannalal, but let me limit only the Pannalal which has written Mahelajiv or Manvini Bhavai or 3-4 more works. Not Pannalal,
not the later,
who has written scores of mythological novels. So, Pannalal, I would have that rider.
I know. Just a small point here. Let's experience a little touch of what a Gujarati language magic can do. I mean, I was going to read something from, of course, Madhu and Bakshi, and but we'll come to that later. But here is Deepak Bhai's own long quotation, Jivini Atmakatha, from his very early book. And my God, I mean, if you read that, and if you read Pannalal's description of the extraordinary ways by which complete humanity and his accusations to Uparwala, the God, saying, just as Jesus says that God you have abandoned, thou art Father, you have abandoned me. Pannalal's character, Kalu, ends up saying that you bastard, this is why you gave us birth on this earth. But that is Pannalal writing. But here is something. Just get the feel of what Gujarati language can do. મેં એવો તો શું ઘણો કર્યો છે? તમે બધા મારી સામે આમ ટીકી ટીકીને શું જોયા કરો છો? હું કંઈ ગાંડી નથી. ના હો, ગાંડી હોઉં પણ ખરી. પછી કાનજીને પૂછી જોજો ને, એ કહે એ સાચું. અને આમ જુઓ તો દુનિયામાં કોણ ગાંડું નથી? એકવાર જીવ મળી જાય પછી માણસને જે લગ્ની લાગે એ તેને ગાંડો જ બનાવી દેશે. એવી લગ્ન મને લાગી કાનજીની. ચગડોળમાં ઈ મારે હારે બેસી ગયો, ત્યારથી મારા આંખ ને હૈયામાં એ વસી ગયો. પણ ફાટરે ભૂંડા, તમારા સંસારિયાના નાત ને જાતના રિવાજ, હું ગાયજણ ને ઈ તો પટેલ, અમારાથી પરણા જ કેમ? છતાં મારા મનમાં ઊંડે ઊંડે આશા હતી એ કાંજી ભડનો દીકરો હશે, એ કાળજું કઠણ કરીને મને પરણમાં તૈયાર થશે, દુનિયાદારીના વિચારમાં એ નહીં પડે અને સાબુ ખરીદવાનું બહાનું કાઢીને મને કેવી ચૂમી લીધી હતી યાદ છે. તે દનથી હું તો રોજ વાટ જોતી હતી કે ક્યારે એ આવે ને મને લઈ જાય. અને એક દીએ આયા ખરા, મારી પાસે વચન માગ્યું, મારો કાંજી માગે ને હું ન આપું એ કંઈ બને. તમે કહેશો પણ જીવી તે વચન પાર્યું શા માટે? Just get the feel of GV's outburst. A notebook of GV's pages would go anywhere in the world as a work of fiction, as a word to what a Gujarati language can do to the ears if your ears are tuned to listen to the language. And this we find all across some of the outstanding works of Gujarati fiction. Just it's an act of reading that comes to life, not what is on the page, you know. But continue, please.
Yeah, I would also add two more names before we move to
Move on, yes,
next
yeah.
one.
Dhiruben.
Dhiruben Patel.
Yeah.
She is a very good storyteller, and she is equally at ease with rural background or city background or whatever. And I have always wondered about Dhiruben that she is a typical case. She has imbibed Gandhian values in her life, in her writings, and still you cannot call her a Gandhian writer. She stands for women. Many of her characters are very strong women, but you cannot label Dhiruben as a feminist writer. She, I think, prefers to take a middle path in both cases. When she began writing fiction, the Gandhian period was almost coming to end, but still it was very much there. And when she started writing, feminism was not so much in the air, at least in Gujarat. Both these things somehow came very late to Gujarat, the Dalit movement and the feminist movement. But as a writer, as a creative writer, I would prefer Dhiruben. That, of course, not many of her works have been translated in good, readable English, but that can be done. And the last one that I would prefer to introduce to outsiders is Varsha Adalja. She is a prolific writer, and whenever you face a prolific writer, you always have the problem that whatever he or she writes is not of the same level or same quality. That's true about Varsha Ben's writings as well. And again, when she began writing, she was not particularly a feminist writer. She was basically a storyteller when she began. And then she moved on to what we can call docu-novel, where you go to field, you study events or people, and then write about it. And she was perhaps the first one to do this in Gujarati, go out to field, see, experience, and then write. But then, over a period of time, she almost moved to feminist writing. And most of her later novels, and the culmination of that comes in her last novel, Crossroad. I mean, she is a very powerful and a feminist writer, a very good storyteller, and very readable. So I would recommend her as the first, one of the first 6 writers.
Just
that one
for
can introduce.
information, her Crossroad will be available in English translation within 6 months.
Yeah, it is
And
translated.
Dhiruben's 2 books are available in English translation. Not terribly well done. Agantuk is done and all that. But, and there are few other, Kundanika Ben became extremely well known, became a household word for her novel. But this is an interesting observation. One should reflect on it because it says something about how the Gujarati reading habits betray a certain view of life, even now, which is that, as he pointed out, the entry of the quote-unquote the Dalit writings in Gujarat and the writings from a perspective of a woman, we can use the word feminism, came much later and doesn't have a strong presence. That shows the patriarchy continues to dominate the Gujarati psyche. And therefore, certain kind of fiction that the world offers, we are longing for it. The Nobel Prize winner for 2022, the French woman, is writing only about growing up as a child, as a young girl, woman, brother, sister, foi, kaki, mama, fua, badda. But it all brings a world that speaks the language that you ever heard before. Similarly, the Dalit writings, of course, there is a lip service, prizes are given, there is Academy of Dalit Literature, but the way by which it can challenge the poetics, the aesthetics of fiction that Gujarat seems to celebrate in the writings of even Munshi and name it all, will get half knocked out if this poetics is allowed to emerge. And that poetics will show that the heart of all your wonderful narrative storytelling, there is patriarchy which is ruling. Just as yesterday somebody pointed out, at the heart of all social milieu, ultimately is the 2 white men who are ruling the world. Zuckerberg, and that's the game we need to know how to play. Let the voices within yourself, which is not the voice of a patriarch inheritance, because you and I also have the same voice inside somewhere. We need to recover that. Then Gujarat will write a different fiction, hopefully. Anyway.
Yeah, one second.
Sure.
Let me add something.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I mentioned Varsha Ben as a very
Yes,
strong
of course.
feminist writer, but she is not the first one. The first feminist novel in Gujarati was written by her elder sister, Ila Arab Mehta, Batris Putoini Vedna, which preceded Kundanika Ben's novel Saat Pagla Akashma, and so it has historical importance as well as a novel, as a piece of fiction also. Even now it is readable. And I would also like to mention her another novel, which I think hardly anyone else has tried to do, and that is Ward. It has already also been translated into English. Because Ward, the fence, because there she has taken 2 problems together. The protagonist woman, she has double disadvantage. One, she comes from what we call minority community. Now, we are so much afraid that we can't mention the name of that community, so we always say minority community, and I will go by that. And second disadvantage is she is not married, and she is searching for accommodation in a city. And the experiences that she has, she is rejected from wherever she goes, either because she is from minority community or because she is unmarried. And I mean, this is something, but perhaps because of the reason that she has tackled these 2 problems, this novel has not become so much popular in Gujarat. but it has been translated into English and it's a good translation.
Yes, right.
So I would like to add her name as well, not only from historical reason, but also because...
It stands on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, one of the questions, we don't have much time. Do
Yeah,
we
I
have
know.
5 minutes? How much time do we have? 5 minutes. Okay, the very last, 2 points. Now that Ila Ben and Varsha Ben is mentioned, nice to say Ben, huh? It's such a good feeling. The father, Gunvantra Acharya, and when you think about these whole journey of different location, when the location changes, like Sauras enters, Meghani enters. When you think of Kutch, then you have, other writers who enter, Dhirendra Mehta and others. What is fascinating is when not only location, but the whole Sthala Kala gets shifted. So when the seafarers come into the picture, and one of the novelists who reached every second home of Gujarat, that's a romantic way of saying it, it reached every 95th home of Gujarat, is Dhruv Bhatt's novel called Samudrantike, which is translated very well, decently in Gujarat, in English. So seafarer world, it's a coastal, Gujarat is coastal. So we should have at least 15 Hemingways coming out, from that entire experience of being out there in the sea, but very little we have achieved. But Dhruv Bhatt has done the magic of bringing, and before that Gumantra Acharya had done, and so on and on. One of the last question. When we make our choices, Deepak Bhai, we are driven by storytelling. So it's like seeing 9 out of 10, or rather 9.5 out of 10 Netflix presentations are hopelessly bad, but we hold on to it because it entertains, it tells stories, and बैठे हैं और कुछ काम नहीं है देख रहे हैं. Do we read fiction like that? Meaning our criteria for judging what is memorable, outstanding and significant is determined by the fact that it entertains and gives us pleasure, or as Govardhanram pointed out, because it invites us to reflect on the transformation of the self. Number one. But that's a very highly, darshanik prashna that only Rara Ravi Shankar can ask, and so on and on. But the most important is language is a determining factor as a criteria. How you may have grand ideas, you may be doing feminist writing, but are you able to generate and give your resources of your language to the writings you are doing? Are you expanding the range of what Gujarati language can do? One author that comes to my mind, whom we all should celebrate forever because for so many reasons, is Swami Anand. A writer who is not a novelist, but he, quote unquote, is fiction. Fiction which is fact, fiction. And it's amazing how we can suddenly experience the thrill of the language in which we are born. And of course, a vision of life, because Swami Anand offers that also. How to be on your own. Some remarks on that. What criteria would you use to judge a work of fiction?
Swami Anand is one of the authors very close to me, to my mind. But similarly, Chandravadan Mehta is closer even than Swami Anand to me. But I did not mention these names because we are not talking about prose as such, but we are talking about fiction, novel especially. And neither Swami nor CC perhaps tried one novel, I'm not sure. He did. Like Uma Shankar tried. And one of the researchers has named his book Nan Shankar to Uma Shankar. I don't see any reason why Uma Shankar's name should be there. Because that piece, if it did not carry name of Uma Shankar, no one would have noticed it. It was noticed only because it was published under his name. It is not a milestone, certainly not. Nan Shankar, yes, he was the first one to write Gujarati novel, so you can say he was a milestone in a way. But I'm just responding to you that Swami Anand or CC, there are so many great prose writers in Gujarati, but many of them have not gone to fiction writing. Most of the prose writers of that were close to Gandhiji, like Kaka Sahib Kalilkar, now what about his prose?
Oh, yeah.
But somehow, I can't explain why, but most of these Gandhian writers have not gone to writing fiction, either novel or short story.
Ramanlal.
There would be some exception. No, he was not a Gandhian. He never met Gandhiji in his life. He himself has noted in his autobiography that only once he was traveling in the same compartment of the train in which Gandhiji was traveling, but he thought that Gandhiji is too big a man to approach and say that, oh, I am Ramanlal Desai, who has been writing novels on independence movement. So he didn't do that. And he was not at all involved in freedom movement personally. All throughout his life, he was working for Gayakwad, the Baroda state. And another interesting thing in the case of Ramanlal, if you notice closely, whether it is Bharilo Agni or any other novel, Divya Chakshu, he doesn't clarify the locale. There is no name given to the place. It's either it's fictitious name or there is no name. And he directly never confronts the British Raj. He cannot do that, of course, because he was working for the Maharaja of Baroda. Yes, we are short of time. So just one final.
Before I make a final point, one little observation, which is the delight of this afternoon. I've been watching one of our listeners. આપનું નામ શું? આરતી બેન. I think we have a reader in 2022, આરતી બેન. No problem. પણ એમના મોઢા પર જે એક પ્રકારના વિસ્મયનો ભાવ હતો આ સાંભળતી વખતે, જે એમનું ઓછું સંભળાય છે છતાં આપણે બધા સાંભળનાર કરતાં એ વધારે સાંભળી રહ્યા હતા. સો અને now
whatever I had to say, I've said, and we don't have much time to discuss further. All I would like to say is I'm very thankful to the organizers of this event for giving both of us opportunity to project a very small segment, say, of Gujarati language and literature. So my first thanks to them. I'm also thankful to you for Prabodh Bhai for, what should I say, provoking me or putting me on in the defense box, whatever you say. But I really enjoyed our conversation. I would be failing in my duty if I don't thank my friend Dr. Kevna Desai, because I had a very long and fruitful discussion with her on feminism and feminist writing in Gujarati. And one thing that she pointed out is very relevant when we discuss this is that all novel or any work of literature which is woman-centric is not a feminist writing. And you can see we have a long tradition of fiction where a woman is at the center of the story. But that is not feminism. Feminism, and we had a quite good discussion on that, so I am thankful to her. And finally, as I said earlier, to come to this place at 2 o'clock in the afternoon cannot be possible without genuine, deep interest in Gujarati language and literature. So I am thankful to all of you. And I have seen, I have noticed, I have marked that not a single person has left during our conversation. So all those who came here knew what they have come for. So I'm thankful to all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They couldn't leave because they were surrounded by 20 volunteers who were making sure that you can't leave this place. But this is wonderful. We haven't even touched upon the most recent last 50 years of major experimentation that has been going on, and Gujarati fiction is playful and delightful in these very recent expressions. Madhu is one of our most brilliant, gifted prose writers.
Chandrakant
Bakshi
Yes,
ને
Bakshi we-
બક્ષી ને ઘરે ઘરે વંચાતા 150 ચોપડીનો લેખક આખું ગુજરાત મને ઓળખે છે, which is true. બક્ષી, પાલનપુરનો ઝવેરી. Okay, thanks.